flat world surrounded by a god-made flesh. Rivers of magical energy that flow throughout the world. Elemental dragons that banded together to create an empire. Political intrigue, subterfuge, elitism, and shifting loyalties. Gods that will do anything to maintain their position. A diversity of races across the land. Let's get it on. Hey everyone, welcome to That Midgard Show, a podcast dedicated to discussing the Midgard campaign setting published by Cobalt Press. I'm Clayton Thompson and I manage the Midgard Adventures Discord server. We're an independent cooperative group that is affiliated with Cobalt Press, and we run regular organized play games using Shard, Foundry VTT, and Roll20, as well as some IRL games in a few locations around the United States. Midgard Adventures is a place to adventure in Midgard setting, as well as talk lore, share ideas and advice, and to gather in a fun, safe place. Our community is open to everyone, particularly those new to Midgard and D&D. So check us out. There's an invitation available in the section down below. And joining me as host is Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hey everyone. I'm Joe Tichello. Besides being a member of the Midgard Adventures community, I have been playing D&D for about 28 years as both a player and a DM. And I have a YouTube channel you may have heard of called DM Toolbox. I've been doing that for about a year and a half. And, it's mostly to help DMs to just find tools to help them kind of enhance their games. I do reviews of mostly third-party products, third-party books, Kickstarters, Patreons, anything that I think might help you to enhance your game. And then I also have a few other socials like my TikToks and things like that. And all that good stuff will be down below in the show notes.
Yeah, if you haven't watched Joe's show, definitely check it out. A lot of great stuff. I love it. I catch every episode as soon as he releases it. So why? Yeah. So why the show? Joe and I love the Midgard lore, and we want to talk about it with you all. Because there's a deep well of Midgard lore with more coming all the time, we thought a show such as this would be of value to players and GMs interested in Midgard. And also, since Cobalt Press considers their content a toolbox for your own campaigns, we'll also provide you advice on how to incorporate the content into your games.
Yeah, and we'll also kind of give tips and tricks on how to take content from other settings and adapt it to Midgard. The most important part of the show is that we'll only discuss published material and our interpretation of that content. Remember that, Midgard is a setting that a lot of people play in. You should always make it your own, but this is going to be our interpretation of it. And, there are many ways to use that Midgard content. And there's going to be times when even Clay and I have different approaches, different opinions. We see things a little differently, and we'll discuss that and, hopefully get some of your feedback on how you see it. And we want to really encourage you to talk about those interpretations of yours. Comment down below. Let us know what you think about stuff, and we can always discuss that in future episodes. So even better, make sure you head over to that Discord link that Clay mentioned earlier and discuss on the server with us. We're on there all the time. We have a very active community, so come be a part of that with us.
Yeah, totally. You'll hear Joe and I talk about how your mileage will vary, in your interpretation. So, tell us what you think. Do you think we're full of it, or, do you have a different interpretation of that? That's what this show is all about, is for us to talk about, our ideas, as well as bring our audience ideas to light as well. So we're targeting to release the episodes on a weekly schedule on YouTube, as well as audio versions on all the major podcast platforms, so you can listen to us without being tied to a screen. So let's get into it. Joe, what attracted you to the Midgard setting?
Well, I think for me, it's kind of what we were just talking about, right? I like that. It's what I call the magic formula. It's this right balance of established lore, but it's built with enough leeway to make it my own world and play it without feeling like I'm going to break the world, right? When I got into D&D back in the early mid 90s, Dragonlance was my jam. That's the setting I played in. But I find that Dragonlance has almost been in this over-established setting where I feel kind of constrained by the lore. And I'm afraid I'm going to break something if I don't do it a certain way. But with Midgard, I feel like I can just destroy a city, reshape nations, and that's okay. You know, in my version of Midgard, maybe I just, raise Zobek to the ground, and in yours, it became a vast empire, and that's cool. So that's one of the big things for me. I spent time in, Forgotten Realms. I've, done a bunch of home brewing. I had my own world. I was even, pulling stuff from like Pathfinder, 4E adventures, converting it all to 5E. And I just really wanted something more, something a little bit more established. And, I'd already been playing with the Kobold Press monster books, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, like Tome of Beasts and Creature Codex and all of those. And a friend of mine suggested check out Midgard. And, he said, go get the Midgard World book. So I did. And as soon as I picked that thing up, I was hooked. I was just all in. I mean, we're talking this like massive, diverse world, unique properties I just love. Things like ley magic, which I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more, down the line a little later today even. But, I don't think I really started, unfortunately, with Midgard until maybe like 2020. So I kind of felt like I missed a lot, and I've really been playing catch up, which I think I've done pretty well on in like a pretty big way. So it's just become the setting that I love. It's my go-to setting. But what about you, man? What kind of brought you into Midgard?
Right on. Hey, one word, vampires. Midgard has an entire country that is ruled by vampires and other undead. And when I heard about that, I was just like, oh, I got to check this out. But I played D&D, in high school, and then, I got out of it. And then when 5e came out, my neighbor, was totally into D&D, and he got me back. He brought me back in. And when I started reading, the 5e content and all the lore, I was all in. I kind of restricted myself to the hardcovers that were released by Wizards, and I also participated in adventure leagues, which is Wizards organized play arm. The content was fun, yeah. But over time I found it to be far too human centric. The fantasy books that I used to read, there were a lot of different races. Sometimes it was a little low magic. So I started to delve into, the 3E content, the 4E content, and Pathfinder content for more diversity. And in 2017, a friend of mine was cleaning out his bookcases because he needed room for his other stuff. And he gave me a stack of RPG books. And in there was the Midgard campaign setting that was created for Pathfinder 2 back in 2012. And, I was skimming through the book, and I came across that the first thing I opened when I opened up was, was Morgau, the country that was ruled by vampires. And then as I flipping through, there's this matriarchal society, and then there was another country, that was ruled by dwarves. And I found Midgard to be far more gritty, far more diverse. And for me, it made for much better storytelling as a DM, and I was intrigued. I didn't really jump in hard until 2018. That's when the Kickstarter for the Midgard World book and Hero's Handbook was going on. And once I got those books, I was all in. I love the setting. I love the lore. And about the same time, an organized play group called Midgard Adventures was came about, founded by Mark Turbay. I found his post on Kobold Press's Facebook page, and I just jumped in. I started playing games, meeting people, talking about, the setting. I started GMing. Midgard was my jam, and I never looked back.
That's awesome. Yeah, so, I had a buddy who was like, you don't have Tome of Beasts? What's wrong with you? I was like, I don't know. So that was actually my first Kobold Press book was Tome of Beasts. But yeah, I mean, what a difference. I actually have a buddy too that he DMs for me. I actually get to be a player once in a while.
Right on.
And I met him because I got my dog from him, and I was over at his house. I see D&D books on the floor, and I was picking out the puppies, and we started talking. So the next time I went over, I brought Creature Codex with me, and now like he is hooked. I mean, he doesn't do Midgard, but he is obsessed with all the Kobold Press monster books. So it's definitely one of those settings and those books that I think people would just draw people in, man. Like I feel like everybody knows what Tome of Beast is.
Yeah. Are you DMing any Midgard games?
So my long, almost 4-year long campaign ended earlier this year, and we've been setting up to start a Midgard campaign. We've had a few swing and a miss failed attempts to get our first session with the holidays around, but I think maybe in about 2 weeks we're going to be having session 1. We've already had session 0. Everybody has their characters, and we got minis. We're ready to go. So we're going to be starting a full-on Midgard campaign, starting in Zobek, come hopefully 2 weeks from now. So I'm really excited to be diving in because I've been doing I played plenty of Kobold Press stuff, and I've run lots of one shots, and I did some stuff with them at Gen Con. I ran games for them at Gen Con, but to get a full on long term campaign going, it's something I've been really trying to get done, and it's finally happening. So I'm super excited.
That's awesome.
How about you?
Yeah, I'm actually running 2 campaigns. One is on the Southlands continent. Right now, we've been playing for 2 years, and my game has primarily been set in Nuria Natal, which, if you want an analog in our world, it's kind of very Egyptianish. But we're going to start moving towards the center of content in a jungle, that's called the Kush.
Yes.
Think of it as Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now, if you've seen that movie. And it's basically a jungle that wants to kill you, and also one of the great walkers are there. And, we'll talk more about that, in future episodes.
I didn't realize any of them were down there. I thought they were all out in the West.
There's one. There's one down there. It looks like a big giant tree. But, yeah, and then these like vine lords, that pop off from it, and so it's really kind of creepy and cool. But
are you gonna go by that big lake at all? That giant lake in Southlands?
Oh, totally. That's further east. Yeah, and there's a whole city. That is built on top of the lake. And
I feel like there's a creature in there that would make a great, a perfect, great old one for a warlock too.
Oh, totally. There's something definitely cool underneath that lake.
There's some cool stuff down there, and I want to get in there.
Yeah. And then also a separate group. We're doing a Midgard version of Curse of Strahd, and totally fun. I really, really like Gothic horror. That's one of my favorite genres. The Ravenloft story has just been something that I've been tied to since, the very early days of Strahd and, Tracy Hickman's work, on that. And so, I adapted the story to make it more Midgardy. And, one future episode, we'll talk about, how we've taken Wizards content and adapted it for Midgard. But right now, my party's at Old Bone Grinder. They just found out, the ingredients of the dream pastries, and they're trying to figure out, what to do, about some morally gray choices that they've been. Yeah, and if you're playing, strictly, from the book, I think it's a little less gray and more black and white, honestly. But yeah, for sure. But that's what I've been doing, and then here and there I've been doing some one shots as a player. In our Midgard Adventures IRL game in the Chicago area. So
nice.
So yeah, I get to play. I get the GM, and that's dig it. Midgard's my jam. It's my exclusive setting, and really love it.
Yep. I do a lot of the one shots right now. Like right up here, I got Dib's Wagon of Doom that I built for my players. So we're going to be playing with that real soon.
Oh yeah, Dib.
Yeah. That's literally how I plan on having them meet, is because they're in 2 groups of 3. They're bringing together in a city square in Zobek, and Dib's going to come rolling in, and they will come in and kind of save the day. And I can't remember the kobold's name now, but there's that kobold that gives tours around Zobek. They're going to end up saving him, and he's going to give them a ride to the inn.
Yeah, Dib is one of those iconic Midgard characters. We'll definitely talk more about Dib.
I'm going to make him like Skeletor. He's always going to get away and be like, until next time.
Right on. Hey, where did Midgard come from?
So where it came from is really it was a brainchild, right, of Wolfgang Barr. So Wolfgang, funny enough, he was not a writer. He was a chemist. He was a chemist by training, but he actually ended up going to work for TSR in Lake Geneva, and then Wizards of the Coast in Seattle eventually. But he's one of those guys who I believe he was saying that back in high school he was like writing little stuff and sending it in. That's kind of like his early days, as so many people did. But there's not really an official bio out there for him. But with a little, Googling, there is the Pathfinder wiki that had some cool info. So a few notes here is that, like we said, he was a chemist by training. But he's been part of the tabletop gaming world for like 2 decades. He started as with TSR as an assistant editor on Dragon magazine back in like early 80s. He then worked his way to the position of editor of Dragon, and it was involved with like freelance design and editing for Planescape, Al-Qadim, and most of the other settings of like the early to mid 90s role-playing scene. Back in like 95, he left TSR. He moved from Lake Geneva to Seattle, and he worked at Wizards of the Coast for a short time, where he designed a number of like computer, card, tabletop games, and as well as like that popular Dark Matter campaign setting. In 98, he moved away from kind of the corporate gaming world and has since had a pretty successful career as like a freelance writer, designer, publisher, including Green Ronin Publishing, Malhavik Press, Piazzo, Wizards of the Coast. So he's done a bunch of stuff there. In 2006, he founded Open Design, which kind of led us to where we are today, because in the spirit of creating a community of gamers and artists, designers to discuss how to create and have more fun with adventures and kind of how to write better ones. So he kind of started all that, and he continues to write freelance magazine articles, adventures, other gaming content. He published Kobold Quarterly, which was a periodical magazine, which I think you could probably still grab copies of on one of those like drive-through RPG maybe or something.
They're also available at the Kobold Press store. Yeah,
also available at the Kobold Press store.
Yeah.
And then, he did, like I said, he did that stuff with Al-Qadim. He actually told a really cool story about how he got involved with Al-Qadim during Gen Con. But because of that experience, Piazzo tapped him to write the inside cover text of their Legacy of Fire adventure path back in spring of 2009, which, funny enough, I mentioned earlier that I was pulling stuff from Pathfinder and 4E to use in my 5E games. Well, one of the very first adventures I did that with was Legacy of Fire. So that the first adventure there was a lot of fun. But that kind of in those Al-Qadim type stuff kind of invoked the 1001 Arabian Nights, and he was given credit for them in the introduction to the Jackal's Price, since he received actually no official credit on any of the book's tables of contents. So he has quite the history in the RPG industry. But then Midgard comes around, right? So Clay, why don't you kind of tell us about how Midgard itself came to be?
Yeah, and this is information that we pieced together, through various interviews done with Wolfgang. But he's always talked about how Midgard started as a setting from when he was 14 years old. It was his homebrew campaign that he ran D&D games for. But unlike a lot of similar long-running projects, which often turned into that human-centric low fantasy world, adult Wolfgang, he took Midgard, to the next level, and he developed it in a way that distinguished itself, in this is my opinion, but it distinguished itself amongst all the other RPG settings by utilizing, great world-building techniques. In fact, he has published a book of essays on world building and things like that. And, he really believes that the best way to begin a world is to start in one place. And Zobek was the place that he started. But he also mixed in a great deal of Central and European folk tales, which served as the major inspirations. And like I said earlier, his initial products centered around the free city of Zobek. And that is a clockwork city that sits on the edge of a foreboding forest. So think of Grimm's fairy tales, type forest, Black Forest in Germany. Yep. The Margrave, which is that forest, just north of Zobek. It's said to have a mind of its own. And that is a place that you can spend a long time adventuring in.
It's its own setting.
Well, totally. And if you want a creepy, haunted forest, Margrave is the place to be. Yeah. But over time, more material was released for Midgard in the Kobold Quarterly, and through Open Design, which was his publishing house. And a little known fact, or major fact, that people know, is that Wolfgang started doing crowdfunding of content, before there was even a Kickstarter. He called it a tip jar. And then it kind of blossomed from there. And in fact, there were some community sponsored projects that you can't buy. There's two of them that comes to mind. You cannot find them published anywhere. It was released only to the backers, of the project. And boy, I'd give
Castle Shadowcrag being one of them.
Shadowcrag did eventually come up, but an early version of Castle Shadowcrag for sure. And, the other title just kind of left my head, and, we'll probably put it in the description notes.
We remember what it is.
Yeah. But in 2012, he really buckled down and released the Midgard campaign setting for Pathfinder First Edition, and the Age system. And based on our research, Open Design, released Midgard materials for third edition through fifth edition, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder 1E, 13th Age, Swords and Wizardry, and the Age system. But the bulk of the content, I would say 90% of it is 5e, and a huge investment was made, on that RPG edition.
Yeah. I mean, back in 2018, they released what you would consider a mostly system neutral world book, right? Which kind of advanced the setting 10 years, which is kind of cool, because when they did their Pathfinder campaign setting book, it was done very well. And then they said, all right, let's release a new one that's kind of system neutral, Pathfinder /5e book. And they said, well, let's bring everything up 10 years. So when you read through that book, you will see the differences. You'll see, they'll talk about what it was like before and bring it up to speed to now. And, they have those books out now. I know if you're listening, you can't see it, but I'm holding up the Midgard World book. This one has the 5e logo on it, but there is a version that does not. And really, there's not much difference. It's just a couple of tables. So regardless of which one you have, they work. They also came out with their Patreon, right? Which supported their Warlock and Warlock Layers projects. That launched sometime in 2018. And it basically offered it was almost like their playtest platform. They would release new content, new stuff that they would put out to us and we can play with. And a lot of times that stuff makes it into published books. And then with the Warlock Layers, it was adventures. Same thing. A lot of these adventures they would put out on a monthly basis to their Patreons. You can get it in a little print pamphlet or PDF through that. And they're fantastic. And they release compilation books of those every year, and they're amazing. But unfortunately, we're going to see Warlock Patron heading off into the sunset this year. They announced just recently that after this month, it's pretty much done. We're not going to get charged for it anymore. We're not going to see new stuff in 2023. But from what I think they've said, it sounds like their blog on the Kobold Press site is going to become a little more prominent. They're already been releasing much bigger articles for the blog. And if you are a Kobold Press fan and you haven't checked out the blog, what a resource that in itself is. You should be checking that out every week. I think on Mondays they always drop some new content, and a lot of times it's like a series of stuff. So that's something really amazing to be checking out.
Yeah, there's articles going back all the way to 2012. So there's age stuff, Pathfinder stuff,
lore. I mean, like I was looking for like a specific piece of lore I couldn't find in the books anywhere, and I found a blog article on it. And I'm like, this is what I needed. Like, there's so much cool stuff in those blog posts. They did a series just recently that I'm following about clerics and how to give them like this clerical quest kind of thing for their god. So much cool stuff. Just it's a resource that needs to be tapped more. I'd actually argue that, and I think you would agree, right, that KP has probably released more content in terms of lore and player options than WotC has.
Oh, totally.
I mean, the Tome of Heroes book that recently came out is probably my favorite book of 2022. That book is just packed full of really cool stuff. Especially, I love their gunpowder rules in there. Then as far as adventure content, I would say it's pretty evenly matched when you take into account like Adventure League, DM's Guild, stuff like that. I mean, so much stuff. There's actually, I'm sure we have a link to it on the Discord. There's definitely a link to it on the Facebook site for Lou's spreadsheet that gives every adventure released, every official Kobold Press adventure released by level, by region, by location, so you can find the exact adventure you want to run where you are for your level range. It's a phenomenal tool, and he keeps it up to date. He just released a new one a couple days ago. Another difference I'd say is that KP, never positions Midgard lore as monolithic, right? It's very unique. It's very diverse. It's very flexible. Which is what drew me to it. Like I said, we can destroy cities and it's okay. Like I literally asked questions about stuff to some of the authors, and they're like, I left that vague intentionally. Do what you want with it. You tell me what it's like,
Yeah, you could even pick a spot on the map and put a new city there,
Yeah, I mean, and I'll use other publishers' books, to create and flesh out cities that haven't been fleshed out, things like Spectacular Settlements, to just flesh that stuff out. It's fantastic. And Wolfgang has stated publicly many times that he feels that the Midgard content exists to augment your own setting, or at the very least your own games, more so than being just this exclusive, rigid setting. Here it is, play it like this. Like, he will tell you, do what you want with it, man. It's yours. I gave here it is. Here's a present. He gave us a little present and said, do whatever you want with it. It's yours now. And it definitely captured me in that way. So, but yeah, I mean, and that kind of, I would say, kind of brings us into, if somebody wants to get into this, right? Like if they're like, all right, well, this sounds cool, Clay. This sounds cool, Joe. I want to get into Midgard. What books should I get to start? I held up that World book. Is that the book I need? Like, what would you suggest if you had to say this at a minimum? And this is a suggestion. What would you say are your books?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, Joe. At a minimum, the Midgard World book. It's that thick. It covers every region on the map. And again, like Joe said, there's some elements in here that are very vague, that allows you to do what you want with it. So yeah, definitely the World book. This is the limited edition cover that I got through the Kickstarter.
If you're wondering what the difference is, guys, he's just showing off his limited edition. This is a very sought after, hard to find version of the book. But but it's system agnostic. Really. Yes. And so if you play Age or anything else, the lore is still good. Yep. The other thing I would recommend, at a minimum, and I'll probably change my mind on this, is the Hero's Handbook. This came out at the same time as the World book, but I'd probably say, get this one or the Tome of Heroes. The content in here is also in Tome of Heroes, plus a gob more races and subclasses and things like that. And so with these two books, you got everything you need. And that coupled with the blog content,
That's it. You're done. You don't have to spend any more money, and all of their stuff is available as a PDF if you don't want to invest in the hardcovers or live in a country where shipping is
Right.
cost prohibitive. But some should haves. And these are this next one is conditional upon are you going to adventure there? So should have is the Zobek book. There's a lot of information in the Midgard Handbook about Zobek. This is Cobalt Press's latest Zobek Clockwork Heroes. They got a bunch of other publications on Zobek, but a lot of that material has rolled up into this, and more content was added. And watch Joe's DM toolbox on this book. A lot of great information. Put
Just
in that
did that
show.
video like a couple weeks ago. It's a good book.
And if you're a GM, Cobalt Press has 4 bestiaries. Pick any one of them. There's
all of them.
Yeah, or all of them. There's 400 creatures in there, way more creatures than you possibly use. But I'm kind of a creature hoarder, and I love bestiaries. The bestiaries provide me inspiration for encounters and stories and things. I'm
going to put you on the spot. What's your favorite of the 4 books?
Oh God, that's like picking between your kids. I have to say the most recent one, Tome Beast 3. Man, there are some hard hitting, cool creatures. If you like oozes, that book has some killer oozes in it.
I think we're going to do a little creature spotlight in some future episodes where we'll pick some favorite creatures out of those books.
Yeah, and most importantly, we're going to suggest how to play them.
Yes.
But there's a lot of lore behind them, and that's what's great about the bestiaries is they include the lore. And then I think a nice to have, and again, this is a conditional book if you're going to adventure in that area, is the Southlands. The Southlands is a huge continent, not as thick as the World Book, but it's just one continent. But man, you can spend forever in just the Southlands. You can spend forever in Zobek, for that matter. So Joe, what about you?
I'm gonna pretty much agree with you here. The World Book is a must-have, and I want to throw this disclaimer that book, right? It's a huge book. You do not have to read this cover to cover. My suggestion to people is read through the first chapter because it gives you the history of the world. It gives you some good information about how things work. And that's part of the point of this show is we're going to be kind of walking through this book and talking about the different things to help you. So when you say, I want to run an adventure, in the 7 kingdom or the 7 cities, what do I need to know about that? You can maybe queue up that episode of our show at some point and listen to that, and it will help. But use that book and read the section of it that you want for your particular, game or your sessions.
Yeah.
I would agree with you that the Hero's Handbook, I know you said Tome of Heroes, it could be replace it. I see Tome of Heroes as more of, an add-on, almost like Xanathar's, adds on, or Tasha's adds on to the player's handbook. I think that the Midgard Hero's Handbook not only gives you race and class options, teaches you about ley magic and all this stuff, it also gives the players a nice little overview section at the beginning of what Midgard is. So everything in the World Book, they kind of do this really quick, 4-page summary, just so players kind of get a good feel of it. And there's spells and stuff in there. So I think that it is definitely a must-have for everybody. I would also argue that Deep Magic might be a must-have because Deep Magic is really expands on the magic of Midgard. There's a lot of unique things. It kind of touches on some of the Hero's Handbook, but it really fleshes them out in Deep Magic. You're talking about a book with 700 new spells. And I'm not going to tell you that every one of those spells is perfect and, great. There's some off-balance spells in there, but for the most part, Deep Magic does an amazing job of fleshing out the magic of Midgard, and you can get the spell decks and stuff like that for it. It's a great, great book.
Yeah. Plus, there are pocket editions for.
There are pocket editions for all these.
Yeah.
For the monster books, for Deep Magic, not for the Midgard World Book, but
right.
As far as should haves, I'm going to just say everybody should have the monster books, even if you don't play in Midgard. I feel like every dungeon master should have at least one, if not all, of the monster books from Cobalt Press, because they're just better. You know, the CRs are more in tune to what the challenge of an encounter definitely should be. The monsters are just more fun in these books than anything else out there, in my opinion.
Yeah, the casting creatures in that book is OGL spells, so you don't have to buy supplemental resources, but of course you can always change up those spells as well, bringing in Cobalt Press stuff or some of your other WotC spells.
And they'll actually, some creatures have, if you go through, like, those monster books are not Midgard books. They are just monster books. So it is not specific to the Midgard setting, though many of these creatures are found in Midgard, and they will tell you about that. They'll have a blurb on it, or some of them will actually have a Midgard version where they swap the spells out for Midgard spells, and they'll say, reference the Midgard Heroes Handbook or reference Deep Magic for descriptions of these spells. But they will tell you, here's a Midgard version of the monster, and here's how you use this monster in Midgard. So they do kind of put blurbs in there, but it is not a Midgard monster book specifically.
Yeah, important distinction.
Yeah, very important distinction. So everybody buy those books. As far as a nice to have, I'm kind of with you on your Southlands and Zobek picks. Personally, I feel like Zobek is the place to start a campaign, especially if you're new to Midgard or your players are new to Midgard. Zobek is the perfect starting point. And that Zobek Clockwork City is, an awesome book. It literally just released earlier this month. Some of you may have the Zobek Gazetteer and Streets of Zobek, which is essentially what is in that book. It's taken those two, it's added a few new adventures, it's fixed some stuff where, like, one book said a stat block was this, another one said it was that, and they just kind of evened everything up. But any of those Zobek books are good to have, and it's such a great, amazing city to play in. So highly recommend it. If you're not planning on playing in Zobek at all, you don't need it, right? Just like if you're not planning on playing in Southlands, you don't need it. The World Book does cover the north part of Southlands, the part you were talking about, you're playing in that Egyptian type area. Mm-hmm. So that could be enough for some people, but if you want to venture further south, The only other one I would argue that I want to throw in there as a nice to have is Tales of the Old Margrave, especially if you're going to be playing around Zobek. That book is fantastic. I know a lot of people who say it's their favorite Cobalt Press book. Amazing adventures, amazing setting, cool poster map. It's not huge; it's like that big. I should have grabbed it off the shelf to show you guys, but that is probably one of my favorite books that I would throw in there. So that would be my picks. So
right on. Hey, if you guys have some favorites, put them in the comments below, and we'll read them in the future. Tell us what book you like, why, and how you use it. The more information we share with the community, the better. Yeah. But when you start diving into the content, you'll find that Midgard is flavored with a strong dose of European and Middle Eastern mythology, along with a big dab of Scandinavian and African mythos mixed in. So as an art overview, we're going to dive into the World Book starting on page 8. The very page Joe suggested that you start with in the World Book. It's called The 7 Secrets of Midgard. And as stated in the book, these 7 foundational mysteries provide a quick summary for the game master who wants to plan out a short campaign or even a long story arc. It's also helpful information from the player perspective as well. And you got to remember, there's player knowledge versus character knowledge, and you can take that player knowledge and work it into a backstory for your characters. So, Joe, start us off with the first one.
Yeah, so this is always one of my favorites. So for all of you flat earthers, you're going to love this because instead of a sphere, the world of Midgard is a floating disc shaped object, so it's a nice flat world. And it's encircled by Velis, a serpent god that's biting down its own tail, kind of Ouroboros style, right? There are very few people who really made it to the edge to see this great beast for themselves. And as far as like what's underneath, no one really knows for sure.
On the other side of the coin, right?
Yeah, on the other side, right at the bottom. So if we flipped over, what's down? If we could walk around the edge, or dig through, what would be down there? No one knows, right? There's rumors of a civilization of Fae that live on the bottom half, called the Summerlands. But make it whatever you want. It could be like your other favorite campaign setting could be down there for, if you wanted to, so you can combine worlds or your own homebrew. Like, so cool, right? Because another example of how they've left it open for you to interpret how you want. But Midgard's not really a modern world, dressed up in like those few medieval bits of armory and weaponry, right? It Midgard makes kind of the mythical real, with this world to explore literally from edge to edge. And, we'll get into Veles the Serpent more when we talk about Midgard's gods and all that. But Veles is kind of commonly referred to as the Great Serpent, a monstrous beast that kind of defines the edge of the world. And some say maybe even created the entire world. And we'll get more, I think, into creation down the line, because there's a lot of opinions on the creation of the world. But, he's basically biting his own tail, and he kind of creates the tides through his breathing as he breathes in and out. His storms come from its snorting and sneezing. And, parts of the world don't know much about him. Other parts are more into him. So like Veles is really well known in the Northlands. And what is it called? The Matari? Is that how you say it? The Matari Empire?
I've heard it pronounced Maharati.
Maharati. That's probably more right. Yeah. But is less well known in other places. But if you refer to the Great Serpent, people will know what you're talking about, kind of thing. But he's this kind of big, powerful. He's even maybe referred to as a lazy god who kind of doesn't really speak to his worshippers. Prophecies about him will say that someday he shall consume the entire world. He is, a creature of the end of all things, and doesn't really have a lot of worshippers, but it makes for some great cults in your games. So, a really, really neat mythos just around that, But the other kind of big thing, right, is the elemental dragon lords. I'll kind of let you explain that.
Yeah, totally. You mentioned the Maharati. This is a kingdom that was created by dragons, where non-dragons are minorities. The country is ruled by dragons. In fact, the founder of the Maharati Empire is Maharat. And he's this lawful, neutral, male, ancient fire dragon. And one of the big differences between how dragons are tied together is in Midgard, dragons are more elemental and not so much on the chromatic or metallic sense, So like a red dragon would be, a fire dragon or a flame dragon, gold and silver, they're kind of tied to the wind.
We don't want to say that their creature type is not elemental. Their creature type is still dragon. It's just more of the affiliation. We think of them as more part of the elements themselves.
Yeah. And there's earth-based dragons, different types of creatures, not just specifically one, water, and so forth. But the one common thread is, the dragons are greedy, and they're, on the lazy side. So several centuries ago, most dragons combine their resources to form a vast empire, and realizing that this could give them more influence and power, rather than fighting each other and sit in a cave on a pile of gold, kind of like Smog, in The Hobbit. And the Maharati Empire is considered in Midgard lore to be the most populous and powerful country in the known setting. And if you're looking for a good analog, in our world, think of the Ottoman Empire.
Yes.
They are a scaled race. From dragons all the way down to the lowly kobolds. They have dragonborn in there. In fact, all of the dragon based races are they call each other dragonkin, and the scaled races are the dominant social force. That doesn't mean that there's not humans and elves and dwarves. There are, in fact. And we'll get into this in future episodes. The ruler, the vizier, of the Maharati Empire has been humans. The setting has advanced a little bit, 10 years, and it's different now. but they have used humans to run their government and keep everything in check, keep the economy running, and things like that. So with this patronage of the dragon gods and the aid of elemental sorcery, this empire has grown great.
Yeah.
Joe, what do you think?
What I wanted to add to this is, I noticed you compared it to the Ottoman Empire, and that's something I think that's really cool about Midgard in general is it does kind of almost overlay over our world, the real world, in a sense. If you look at the map, it looks very much like Africa and Europe and Scandinavia and all those, because it was kind of roughly designed like that. And culturally, it's very similar. So when you're wondering, like, what is this place like? Generally, there is some kind of real life comparison that you can kind of say, okay, here's a flavor. And it's not so much like, oh, it's exactly this. It's just to kind of add a bit of flavor and reference for you to run your game better. But you will find that these different empires definitely have a very unique culture of their own as well. And like you said, the dragons and the dragonkin are very dominant in this region. And I think that plays out very much in, you will see non-dragonkin maybe being treated a little more poorly in that empire. And, the way the social interactions might go for your players there. If one of your players is a dragonborn compared to, a human or an elf, they're going to have a different experience in that empire.
Yeah. And totally up to you. Nothing's locked in,
Nothing's locked in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's very cool how you can take this stuff and really make it your own. And I think another big part of Midgard, dragons play a very big role, and dragons are very active in Midgard, right? They don't sit around. They make great villains and even NPCs for your campaign. The other thing that does is the gods, right? The gods play a very active role with the mortals in Midgard. The gods kind of do this thing where they wear these masks to kind of conceal their true identity, and the names they have these different names. They're shifting across lands. They change their appearance and to show themselves as they prefer to be seen in particular lands and avoid being replaced. So think of like Juniper from Roman and Zeus from Greek. That could be the same god with a different mask. That's kind of the idea. Or in your version, they could be two different gods. It's again one of those things that they leave somewhat vague, so you can kind of do what you want with it. But generally speaking, these gods, there's only so many gods, and they reach across civilizations across the world. And they have different worshipers that worship them differently in different places, and they have different appearances.
Yeah, cultural, cultural differences
very
too.
Cultural, right? Like the god of death in the Northlands is, very much more of, which is more of like a Viking type culture compared to down in the Southlands. That's more of like an Egyptian type culture, but the same god might be the god of death in both places. So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, and these gods don't put on a physical mask, right?
I was going to say, right? Yeah, it's more. They're gods, right? They just change their appearance. Like it's an avatar, so to speak, or symbolisms. Like kind of like what is the magic item? The
hat of disguise.
The hat of disguise. Thank you. It's like I'm putting on a hat of disguise sort of thing, but they're gods, so they just snap their fingers and they appear how they want to appear. So don't interpret that mask too literally, but. As a GM, we kind of see gods masked as the appearance they assume, for their worshipers in that place. So it's kind of almost impossible to reveal the true face of a god. Like we don't know if his true face is Zeus or Juniper, right? Or maybe something else. We just don't know. Again, your world, you do what you want with it. Make them separate gods, make them the same god. It doesn't matter, right? It's totally up to you. And I play with this a lot, especially with my cleric. Deities kind of may take up different names, different moral codes, even different teachings from culture to culture, yet are, united by like a similar theme, right? Think of Thor and Perun are both, kind of lightning gods. Is it the same god? Maybe. I don't know. It could just be the same god in a different mask. That's, again, kind of up to you and your version of Midgard. The gods in Midgard, they do kind of have this rich and kind of strange history. They're described as kind of slippery, demanding. They're more, they're much more than just, voices that answer pleas of healing, blessings, prayers, that kind of thing. The gods really have their own goals, their own needs. They want worshipers. I kind of think of it almost kind of very Greek in how, like, when we read Greek mythology, the gods had a heavy hand in the mortal world. I think the gods of Midgard also can have a heavy hand. It's, again, kind of up to you. I think at least in certain regions they might have more of a heavy hand than others, but they definitely like to interfere and mingle. So they play games among their own kind. It's for power, deception. They're kind of jerks. I mean, they really are. They're kind of jerks. I mean, not all of them. Some of them are nice, but I think that they have their own end game. So you can really dive into that with your campaigns if you really want to go kind of God centric with your campaign and stop the evil god from destroying this, something. You can totally do that. It's definitely possible. Or have a player who's a child of a god. Maybe grab the what's the book that Watson released, the Odyssey of can't remember the book. It was a very Greekish book, but it talked about how you can have kind of godlike powers for your player if they're a son of a god. So you can maybe tie some of that in if you wanted to kind of do that too in Midgard. So it's kind of neat. What else? I mean, what else do you think? What would be what's the next secret of Midgard?
Well, it's something that I alluded to earlier. When I talked about, vampires really attracted me to Midgard. There's a bunch of very flavorful hidden races that exist. They're not always very prominent, depending on what part of Midgard you're on. But the lore has several races, and they all have a prominent place in the world, from the outset. There are peoples that are isolated, only recently have been discovered to the point where they are starting to interact with a wider society. The setting, features your traditional humans, elves, dwarves. Humans aren't. I don't consider humans to be the dominant race. I think, there's a lot of them, but there's also just as many elves and dwarves. But there are also some really cool races, called the Raven folk. They have minotaurs, kobolds, dragonborn, trollkins. Kind of part troll, part giant, or something like that. And these races had a place in the world from the very beginning. Their ambitions led to the founding of very unique kingdoms, which is what I really dug. You got the Iron Crags, that's all dwarves. You got the Peruna or the Daughters of Perun, as a different country. You've got the cat folk in Nuria Natal in the Southlands. But I talked earlier, vampires. I love vampires. I love gothic horror, and there's a whole country. It's called the Blood Kingdom of Morgul, and it's near Zobek, and it's a kingdom that you can use as a protagonist to that area. Even in
there's a whole campaign. There's a whole published campaign that takes place in that kingdom.
Yeah, and they've been a menacing and slowly expanding presence in Midgard for years. Their country is officially called the Greater Duchy of Morgul, and it's made up of the principalities of Morgul and Duresh. And, we'll go into this a little bit later, show a map of how everything relates together. But as history advanced, went from the 2012 version of the World Book to the 2018 version, they have since taken over a third province called Krakovar. And they were called the Electoral Kingdom. And they're up to the north, and that country borders, an ocean up there. It's a gloomy land. It's mist shrouded, think Ravenloft, amped up to 11. Steep gorges, dark forests, everything is ruled by vampires, ghouls, or other types of intelligent undead. And if you're alive, you're food. You got to kind of think about that.
Try playing political intrigue campaign with undead. It's fun.
Yeah. They're closely aligned with another race called the Derkul, and they live deep in the airless earth. We've heard Wolfgang talk about scratch his head. The Drow. There's no air down there. What better place for an airless, dark environment to live in is ghouls. And we don't know how, to the full extent. What we know right now is that the kingdom stretches from below the Iron Crags, underneath the Margrave Forest, as far north as Cracovia, possibly, underneath Zobek. In fact, Empire of the Ghouls is a campaign in that Cobalt Press released, and the campaign starts in Zobek, and eventually the party ends up in the Ghoul Imperium. But these guys take ghouls to another level.
Yeah,
they're smart. They will eat you, and they'll put you on a plate on a table and start slowly eating you. You're still alive. If they need to replace people, they'll take the living and turn them into ghouls. And these
they'll also make deals with you, right?
They'll
make trade agreements with you.
Yeah.
They're literally people, sort of.
Yeah,
they're not mindless eating machines.
Yeah, they are a fleshed out culture.
Yeah.
Not mindless, very smart, very powerful. You don't want to get bitten by one of those guys. But
there's a great NPC, Derkul, that lives in Zobek that you can interact with too.
Yeah. So, the Drow they exist along with the dark dwarves and creepers, but they're more refugees. That have fled, the Underdark and have come to the surface. And so excellent race. It's a hard character to play, but it's totally doable. Another race, another hidden race is called Winterfolk Halflings, and they are a race that you don't see too much about. They live up in the north. They're rarely seen. They're a stay-at-home race. They would just rather fish and enjoy each other's company than go out in an adventure. But they make their living primarily as barge folks. Hauling a big quantity of goods over the rivers, and you'll see them more in the northern part of the main continent, in the River Court or in the Grand Duchy of Dornig. Of course, we're going to have episodes on those, but that race is widely believed to be indentured to the elves before the Great Retreat. And that was the time when Midgard was primarily elves, and they decided, peace out, we're out of here, we're going somewhere. And like Joe said, it could be underneath. It could be a different continent. We don't know. But the origins of the Winterfolk, that's one of the great mysteries, and it's ripe for you to contribute your own ideas. Now, one of my favorite ones, and this is the last one I'm going to talk about, is the Catfolk. And the race is not talked about too much in the Midgard World Book. It's featured more prominently in the Southlands campaign setting. But the Catfolk are feline humanoids of natural grace and an insatiable curiosity.
Tabaxi-like, but not Tabaxi.
Yeah, not Tabaxi at all.
Not Tabaxi at all.
Yeah, and there are two main branches of them. One is the Bastet. They're mischievous, they're irrepressible. They adore Bastet, the cat goddess, and the ones down in the south, the plains, in the center of the continent, they're called the Inkosi, and they consider themselves the chosen people of Gamka Firemane, and that is the return titan of Omphia. Again. More on this in future episodes, but you can think of them as, very Zulu-like, or, some other African tribal race, or culture, not race, but a culture. But the Bastedi, they're found largely in Nuria. And then the Nkosi, they honor heroism and honor above all things. I play a character who made a blood oath, but got so drunk, was so drunk when they made that blood oath, they can't remember, what their blood oath was. So they were cast out of their tribe, and they're adventuring to try to find magic to find out what that blood oath is, So that's a character I'll talk about in a future episodes.
Awesome. I love it.
But I think of these guys as, kind of the Klingons of the Southlands, not as bad as, not bad's a poor choice of words, but not as Klingon-y, but I would say they're a mix between a Viking and a Klingon. Honor and glory is what matters to them most. Yeah. Joe, what do you think?
I love the catfolk, man. Like I want to play a catfolk bard that talks to its tail. The tail always ruins the punchlines. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, I want to figure out how to do kind of a build a cat version of a catfolk too.
Maybe I'll do that for one of our character build episodes. I'll build that character.
Right on.
But so what else? What the next big mystery of Midgard, right, is probably one of my favorites. One of the things that really drew me into the world, right? And that's ley lines and the shadow roads, which are two separate things yet one and the same. It's kind of weird. I did a lot of reading to really get clarification on it, and it's one of those things that I feel like they again left somewhat intentionally vague, so you can kind of interpret it. But there is a lot of material on this out here. So what are ley lines? And some people will pronounce these ley lines, but I will fight you. I think it's ley lines. Just like, you went in, you were just talking about the dro. I will fight you and say it's drow.
Yeah. Wolfgang calls it ley lines. That's good enough for me.
Yeah. So it's ley lines. But, so where, like, a lot of you are more familiar, I would guess, with like Forgotten Realms, right? Where magic comes from the weave, or in Dragonlance it comes from the moons. Well, in Midgard it comes from ley lines, which are, in Midgard, ley lines are this kind of this fixture of the world, right? They're this crisscrossing rivers of magic that flow through the world. There's actually a map, which we'll put up. But these ley lines are all over the place. And on this map, you're only going to see the largest titanic ley lines. But think about how a river has all these other branches that come off, all these other pieces that feed into the bigger river, right? These tributaries and stuff like that. So there are these different sizes of ley lines, all the way from small ones to these titanic ones you see on the map. And, a good way to kind of describe them is almost like a circulatory system of the world as well. Like, if you want to think of it that way, that it's basically essential to the life of spellcasters. You need that magic. And what's cool is, like, there's branches, like I said, of these ley lines that flow along these mystical passages. They traverse the plains. And that's where we kind of get into what we call, the Fey roads or the shadow roads. You can ride these ley lines, these shadow roads, to get from point A to point B and traverse long distances. Something that might take you months to traverse, you can do in days on a shadow road. So if you know how to access them, and people who know how to access them, guard that secret closely. That's not something that just anybody can go and say, oh, I'm going to go. It's not hopping on the expressway. You have to know how to do it. But if you do, you can access these shadow roads and traverse this massive world of Midgard really, really quickly. So if you want to get your party from point A to point B quickly, maybe there's an NPC that can help them do that through a shadow road. But it's a great way to do that without just hand wave and montage a travel scene that would take months, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's creatures, good and bad, that live in these shadow roads.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the Book of Shadows, right? The Ebon Tides book kind of touches on this, and different things you can do. There's monsters in our monster books that we talked about earlier that specifically will hang out in Shadow Roads.
Yeah, and they all can look differently. It's just not this tunnel. It could be a creepy forest or a beautiful vista or a desert. Whatever you want.
Yep. Yeah, and depending on where it is and where you're going to. I mean, you can make it make it like a Wonderland. I kind of picture it as like going into Wonderland.
Yeah.
Right? Make it a little trippy. It could be a lot of fun. So, but the other thing about the ley lines is I kind of compare them to rivers, and I kind of like that analogy because they tend to follow the contours of the land like rivers. They will go through mountains, through valleys, things like that. It's on this magical current, and the terrain will also react to that current. So not only will the ley line be shaped by the land, but the land can also be shaped by the ley lines.
Right.
So it's very unique, and there's cities built on the Titanic ley line. Anywhere there's generally a big ley line, there is some kind of major city like what's Nauru Natal down in the Southlands, built right on this massive Titanic ley line because there's power there. So it's not like you just go walk up and say, I'm going to tap into this Titanic ley line. You have to build up and become a skilled caster. In the beginning, you can only touch onto the smaller ones, and over time, you can get into bigger and bigger ones. There are feats that will allow spellcasters to do this, or if you're a wizard, there is a specific wizard subclass for ley magic that lets you do even more, where you can not only tap them and they will augment your power, making spells more powerful and stuff like that, but it's almost like a wild magic where you'll get this kind of random effect generally, but some people can actually lock a ley line into a specific effect. So if you know what you're doing, you can say, I always want this effect when I'm using this ley line. Then you can access that ley line from great distances where normally you'd have to be right next to it.
Right.
So very, very cool stuff. I feel like we're going to have to dive more into ley magic in an episode at some point because it is its own ball of wax, but ley lines definitely to me are one of the most fun things to play with in Midgard. I was super excited that the wizard in my upcoming campaign decided to go this route because I am looking forward to it as a DM to play with that. So
yeah, and if you want to dig more into ley lines, there's a supplement available in Kobold Press's store, and we'll probably have the author of that supplement on a future episode. This guy's an expert in ley lines, and he'll provide you some great information.
And the Midgard Heroes Handbook that we suggested earlier, as well as the World Book, both have information on ley lines and ley magic. The subclass I mentioned, I believe, is in the Midgard Heroes Handbook.
Yeah.
So if those are the two books you got right now, you have enough to get going. But I would hop on the Kobold Press store and grab that ley lines PDF. It's like $3 or something, and it's cheap. Get it because it expands on it, tells you more, has some extra spells, as does Deep Magic. Because it is such a cool school of magic. Really, really neat. So
yeah. So Midgard was never intended to be this static world where the published material takes place in the same year or in perpetuity. And this is the next secret. It ebbs and flows according to how the story that you want to tell. So, Kobold Press has offered us this mega plot, that's built into the setting, in terms of published material. But, this particular secret is more of advice, it's not really lore. And one thing that you'll hear Wolfgang talk about a lot is consider making politics, revolts, status, elitism. All of those can be protagonists in your game. Even the gods, a god can mask themselves as a little old lady, walking on the street, or somebody nursing a mug of mead, in a tavern somewhere, So, your protagonists aren't just monsters and big bads. Elitism is a major core component of another campaign called Courts of the Shadow Fae. And you can really use, elitism and status to drive your players crazy. The the lore, even the 2012 lore and even the earlier stuff, it's still good, it's still relevant, but it's history. And the great thing about Midgard is that it is a world of cultures that are designed to change, to collapse, to grow over time. And some of those changes have come to pass, as Joe and I keep talking about, from edition to edition. Borders have shifted, crowns have been seized or restored. The Electro Royal Kingdom that I talked about earlier, they weren't taken over by the Duchy of Morgau in the 2012 version, but they have been in the latest version, the 2018 version. And Cobalt Press wisely advises that there's just no point in playing a game where nothing changes but the statistics on a player's sheet. Another thing that they talk about, as more of a kind of a GM suggestion is, characters grow through experience and learning. So, as you level, it's not necessarily that a new spell pops into my brain and I'm able to cast Fireball. It's something that I've studied, that I've used my downtime to learn, or I found a wizard's book, that taught me how to do a spell or some other piece of lore. So, find out whether your players have what it takes and use, some external environmental, things to really kind of add flavor and add tension to your games.
Right.
Yeah.
And
go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, one of the things you're talking about, how stuff changed in the handbook here on page 22, they actually, one of the last things they have as they're talking about the history is recent events. And it basically talks about mostly the last 10, 12 years, though there is something about the last 50. But basically, what are the, just bullet points. It's one page, bullet points of recent events. So, if you just kind of want to know real quick, well, what's been going on in the world recently, it's right there in the world book for you. So you can kind of see what those changes really were from the previous book to this one in a quick summary. And I think it really shows that dynamic change of the world.
Yeah, and there's that timeline that spans across multiple pages, going...
Yep. Yeah, shows you all the way from creation through like now what's happened. So it's awesome the way they do that.
Yeah, so essentially Midgard, time flies, right, Joe?
Time does fly, which kind of brings us into the next thing, right? This is kind of a little two-part thing, but Midgard's got a couple of really unique, I don't want to call them rules, but we'll call them unique optional rules for your game. One of which I use in all of my games, not just my Midgard games now, and it's called Time Flies. So when we play a game, right, let's say we're going to play, Tomb of Annihilation, right? Our players start off at level 1, and by the end of it, they're level, let's say they're level 13, and maybe like 6 weeks have passed. Like, that's a lot of power in a month and a half, maybe 2 months. And that's kind of a common theme, and I think in 5th edition is, nowadays people got used to video games, World of Warcraft, and all this stuff where we level up. And, at the end of my session, my players always say, did we level up yet? And generally we're leveling up every like 4, maybe 5 sessions, right? And that doesn't matter whether you're doing experience points, milestone, however you do it. Generally, that's how often you're leveling up. How much time is really passing in game? And if you think about it, that is a lot of power to be gained. A level 20 character is practically a god in a world. I mean, they are powerful. So why are they leveling up? Like, how are they getting this much power this quick? We get it mechanically, it happens, but it doesn't really make sense. So Time Flies is meant to kind of compensate for that. And it's a very simple rule that basically says between our sessions, if we ended a session today, we get back to town and we're going to play again in 2 weeks. Our next session is 2 weeks from today. When we get back together, 4 weeks have passed in game. So double the in-time game from how much time has been in between sessions. If we're in the middle of a dungeon and we kind of had to stop, and we play in 2 weeks, we bank that 4 weeks. And when we get back to town to rest up, all that banked time will then have passed. And that does a couple things. One, it makes the leveling and the power we've gained a little bit more realistic. It also allows for fun stuff. All these downtime activities that we want to do. I wish I could craft a weapon, or enchant a magic item, or what about that when we ran those bad guys out of that bar, we took it over, because we all have done that, and take over a bar at some point in our D&D games. Now we got to run that bar, and that's times to do that. And Tome of Heroes that came out recently this year has got a whole bunch of cool downtime activities and stuff like that. If you want to train in new skills, if that's something you allow in your games, all this downtime is the perfect time to do that. So much you can do with it, because, like we said, it also kind of makes your adventures more of like these long sagas, right? Like, rather than jumping place to place to place to place in a short time, now our campaign maybe spans years in game as opposed to weeks or months. And it can be a lot more, I think, fun and cool for the players to be able to get that downtime for their characters. So I'll generally just tell my players, all right, we're playing in 2 weeks. That's 4 weeks of downtime. Tell me what you want to do during that time. And we'll communicate over Discord or email. They'll tell me what they want to do. And then when we get back together, we'll roll some dice, and I'll tell them what the results are.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun. I use that in all of my campaigns now to great success. Everybody loves it, right?
Right.
It's super cool.
You can even have downtime sessions. I'm going shopping. I'm going to school, taking a class.
Yep. We do it on Discord. That's where we do a lot of our downtime stuff. Is we'll just be chatting over the next 2 weeks. We're chatting on Discord. I'm asking them questions. I'm having them roll dice, just in between whenever. At night, I'm on the phone texting them about what's going on at downtime. And they love it because they get to stay in character during all that, and it's a lot of fun. So, so the other rule that we kind of touched on, you mentioned it in your previous little talk there, was about status. And I know Courts of Shadowfey dives into it, Margrave dives into it, but status is a thing in Midgard. So tell us a bit about status, because you've played with it more than I have.
Yeah. It's prestige and status is a matter of importance. And the setting assumes that your characters come from different stations, social classes, backgrounds, educational level, all sorts of stuff, and your social standing, can be reflected in status mechanics. Let me give you an example. In a lot of games, it's too easy to get information. You walk up to some stranger, you introduce themselves, and then suddenly the stranger is just gushing a bunch of information onto you. What you can use status is, and status could be a numerical formula or whatever works, in your game. And the way I used it in Courts of the Shadows phase, we had a PC that was a luchador, a very famous wrestler, well known. It was even though he wore a mask, he was the face of the group. It was easier for him to get information because he was handing out, autographs and things like that. So because of his celebrity, he had a higher status, and he was able to get more information from folks. And we had another character that was Nkosi. Nkosi aren't common in Zobek. You may find one here or there as a trader or something like that, but it's going to be harder for a character of that race in Zobek to elicit information. So, you can use status at a level of, I am a peasant, or I'm a noble, or I'm a scion of a noble, a child. And the GMs, you can really use status as a protagonist in your game. Think high school, if you weren't part of a certain group, you didn't exist. And again, that elitism is what you can use to just drive your players nuts. And there is a section in the world book about status. It's kind of a table. It's found on
25 of the world book.
Yeah, page 25. But Joe and I, we're going to talk in future episodes on how you can really amp up status and really use that as a storytelling tool.
Yeah.
What do you think,
Yeah,
John?
and I mean, I like I said, we talked about this offline as well. But status in the world book, I think it was kind of created, and it's kind of cool because essentially, like you said, like the guy with the most status kind of became the face of the party. But when you look at like Courts of the Shadowfey, and if you don't have that book, that's a great book to have. It's a great adventure, but it goes into a lot more depth on how status works within the court itself. Same thing with Tales of the Old Margrave that I mentioned earlier in this episode. You can actually have a status with the Margrave itself because it is somewhat of this intelligent forest. And depending on your intentions and how you treat the forest, the forest is going to react differently to you. In the world book, it's more of status as a whole within Midgard.
Right.
But and like we said, we'll talk about it more down the line. But I like the idea of kind of breaking status regionally almost and having status as like what's my status in Zobek compared to what's my status in the Seven Cities kind of thing, and how well known am I across the world?
Yeah.
So it could be a fun mechanic. I want to have a space for on the character sheets for it, and definitely use it in my upcoming campaign because I think it'll be fun to see how the party reacts, and will it influence what they're going to do? Will they make less jerk moves if they know it's going to hurt their status?
Right.
I'm kind of curious because it's almost like a replace. I don't want to call it a replacement for alignment. And I know some people just don't even really pay attention to alignment, but it almost is kind of like a supplement to alignment in a way.
Yeah.
Because your actions will affect your status, just like your actions can affect your alignment.
Right. It's a great way to organically advance your character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really, really neat, man. I like it. I want to play with it more in my upcoming game.
Yeah. So that's the 7 Secrets of Midgard. This is if you read anything, read that section in the world book.
Yeah.
So
sure.
There's so much to unpack in Midgard and even in each of these secrets. So in future episodes, we're going to go deeper into the first 5, and we'll start with a flat world, and that's where we'll kind of provide an overview of the various countries in Midgard, show off the map. If you want to see a Midgard map, it's available online. It's midgardmap.cobaltpress.com. We'll put that information in the description below, but you'll see the entire part of that coin. And don't think that that's it. I don't believe that that's all that's there. I think that, what you see on the map is just a portion of the coin. There's got to be more in the north, the south, the east, and west. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the map ends on land, right? Like it kind of cuts off on that eastern portion. So we know there's something there. We just don't know what yet. So will we get published material? I hope so. If not, I'll make it up as I go.
Oh, yeah. But heck, just the stuff in the blog.
Yeah.
It's enough to go with, Yeah.
So there's so much information.
So, so we're going to do a bunch of episodes that's going to dive deeper into all of the regions, the countries, the races that rule and reside them. And we'll always try to tie in published adventures that take place in these areas.
Yeah.
And if no adventures are available, we'll offer some advice on creating your own adventures for a particular area. We're also going to have some fun segments. We're in each of our episodes, Joe and I are going to pick a creature, from the more than 1,200 beasts published in just Cobalt Press's Beast series alone. So we'll talk about, where they live, the lore behind those creatures, and most importantly, how to play them. And we're also going to have kind of a character forge too, where, we're going to, talk about characters that we play. And we'll do some character builds using the Cobalt Press material. So it's going to be fun. And the goal here is to kind of inspire you. Of course, with a caster, there's going to be your go-to spells, that's in the core material published by Wizards. But there's so much flavor in spell casting and different subclasses and different races that is available in Midgard as well. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, man. I'm already playing a character in a non-Midgard campaign, but using Cobalt Press's Tomohiro's book, and it's so much fun. It's so great. So I'm excited to kind of dive in and do some of that character forging and show off some of my favorite monsters because I think you and I might know those monster books better than anybody.
Probably a little too good.
We both work on the Foundry conversions for them for Kobold Press, so we know them really well.
Yeah. So, Joe, how can people reach you?
Fun, man. I'm excited. Well, you can reach me a few ways. So, obviously, hit me up on the Midgard Adventures Discord at DM Toolbox on there. But make sure you follow me on YouTube. I try to put out videos weekly, sometimes bi-weekly, depending on the week and how busy my life is. But my YouTube channel is also DM Toolbox, and I'm on Twitter, which is I couldn't get DM Toolbox, so I'm Toolbox_DM on there. But my TikTok, my Facebook, my Instagram are all DM Toolbox, so you can get me on all the socials. We'll put that stuff down in the notes and whatnot. But how about you, Clay?
Yeah, hit me up on the Midgard Adventures Discord server. I'm at Clayton Thompson, and that's Thompson without a P. You know, I'm the Scottish flavor of the Thompson clan. We're also going to have a dedicated channel for this show on the Midgard Adventures server, where you can post comments, talk, interact with other members of the community. And of course, you know, if that Discord server is not for you, it's cool. You know, use the comments below, and we'll definitely share you know, things that are posted. You know, Midgard Adventures is a great community of fans that just love Midgard. And we've got channels galore. We got channels for all of the published material, the lore, the adventures. The Mead Hall is where the community hangs out the most. We talk about anything there. And, you know, do check it out. You know, go ahead and join, lurk, you know, and, you know, when you want to, post something.
A lot of the kobolds hang out there. A lot of the authors hang out and chat with us. And, you know, especially in the lore channel is one of my favorite channels to hang out in because I can post a question. A lot of times the guy who wrote the book will answer my question. Like, who better to answer your question than that guy, right?
Yeah.
So, and hopefully some of those guys, hopefully will get out here to come on the show with us and hang out and talk with us about some of the stuff that they literally created for us. So it'll be a lot of fun.
Well, if you like our shows, please click on the like button and subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And even better, spread the word about the Midgard Show. And remember, as Wolfgang Bauer says,
strip it for parts and make it your own. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. Have a good one.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.